Section 1 on numbers, and today's lesson is lesson 6 on rounding off. During this lesson, we will learn about rounding off decimals, about rounding to the nearest whole number, and how to use rounding to estimate the answer to calculations. The key words and phrases today we have to focus on are rounding and estimates. So what is rounding? We can sometimes get an answer with lots of numbers after the decimal point. Instead of writing down the whole thing, you can shorten the answer by rounding. It does make sense. To round a number to a given number of decimal places, first identify the position of the last digit. For example, if you're rounding to 2 decimal places, it's the second digit after the decimal point. Look at the digit to the right of that digit you're rounding to, and it's called the decider. If the decider is 5 or more, you round up the last digit by 1. If the decider is 4 or less, leave the last digit as it is. Don't write down any digits after the last digit, not even 0. Let's look at an example. Round 2.842 to 2 decimal places. You want the 2 digits after the decimal place, which is 8 and 4. But then you need to look at the decider as well, which is 2 as the third digit. 2 is less than 5, so the rounding off is you just leave it at 2.84 because the decider is 2, which is less than 4. The second example, round 20.8537 to 1 decimal place. You want 1 digit after the decimal point. So what is the decider? Yes, the decider would be 5. 5 plus, you can round up. So the 8 will become 9 and your answer will be 20.9. However, as to all problem, there is the critical point you have to be very careful about. Round 5.398 to 2 decimal places. Now, the last digit is 9 and the decider is 8. So how do you round 9? Yes, 9 becomes 1. So you add that 1 to 3 and your rounded up number becomes 5.4. But if you look at the notes there, the question asked for 2 decimal places. So you need to include the 0 at the end. Okay, that is because the question asked for 2 decimal places. If it had not, then you can leave it like that. You can round to the nearest whole number in a similar way. This time, the decider is the first digit after the decimal point. So for example, round 9.318 to the nearest whole number. The decider is the first digit after the decimal point, which is 3. So the answer is simply 9. Example 2. Round 25.68 to the nearest whole number. The decider is 6. So you need to round up. And so your answer is 26, not 25. Practice set 1. You've got 5 questions here. Questions 1 to 4 are A and B. Okay, so you have enough to practice what you have learned. Question 5 is an exam type question. The highest number recorded in a town is 35.3 degrees Celsius. This is becoming more and more frequent these days. Round this temperature to the nearest degree. Just think back to what we've done. If you've forgotten, go back and update yourself. As usual, I've provided you with the answers to check your calculations. Always check after you've done your calculations, not before. And that is your answer. Okay? If you got it right, that's very, very good. If you got it wrong, don't worry. We learn from our mistakes. Just make your correction. Use rounding to estimate the answer to calculations. This is important because this happens in the corporate world. So let's look at what it says. You can check your answers in tricky calculations by estimating. Round each number in the calculation so that all the digits apart from the first one are 0. For example, you can round to the nearest whole number or to the nearest 10. Then do the calculations using the rounded numbers. Don't add them and then you round. Round them first and then you add. Do not round after you've added. Round them first before you add. If your estimate is close to the answer you got, then your answer is probably correct. Let's look at an example here. Ronan calculates that 42 plus 39.99 plus 21.7 is equal to 130.69. Use estimation to check his answer. Do you think it's correct? Let's find out. Remember, you're rounding to the nearest 10 whole number. So 42 will become 40 because 2, the decider, is less than 5. 39.99 becomes 40 because we ignore the decimal places. 21.7 becomes 20 because we're rounding to the nearest 10. Then we do the calculation with your rounded numbers. 40 plus 40 plus 20 is equal to 100. So is 1 correct? Of course not. Practice questions set 2. Use the rounding to estimate the answer to these calculations. A, B, and C. You round them and then you do your calculations. Question 2. The box on the right shows the amount Jacqueline spends each month on bills. Estimate the total amount that Jacqueline spends each month on bill. In this case, you have to round up to the nearest whole number because you cannot do estimations with the decimal point, not for your household bill. Okay? So you estimate that before you add your itemized bills, and that will be your answer. Well, I probably didn't tell you, but this is a short lesson, but it's a very important one, because you at home, you have to do estimation. In the office, you will have to do estimation because your boss will not expect you to be giving him long details of pounds and pence. They would want idea about just pounds, an idea, an estimate or a guesstimate as we fondly call it. Or even at home, when you're doing your bills, you round up in whole numbers. So, what have we learned here? You now know what rounding is and when to round up or down. You know that the rule of rounding decimals is based on the decider, the digit you base your rounding on. The greater than, equal to, and less than rules to apply when rounding off, you also know. You now know you can either round decimals up or leave the digits as they are if the decider is less than 5. That only applies to decimals. You know that rounding can be used to estimate the accuracy of results. You know that estimates are used in the corporate world to make decisions. Corporate world basically is in the office. That's our lesson for today on rounding off. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you next lesson.